Welcome to the Broncos podcast. This is Troy Renck, the Denver Post. Hope you're having a wonderful start to your week. I am here in balmy Indianapolis. It's finally warm here. Been here, I think, 10 times for the combine. Typically, it leaves you freezing, hoping you don't get frostbite on your fingertips walking. I did learn long ago, after about 3 combines, that you can stay inside the whole time without going outside. But it's beautiful out here, and it reflects the mood of the Broncos. So much more optimism now that they have a quarterback. So been an eventful few days. Spent Monday night with a media dinner with Coach Sean Payton at the Nuggets Pacers game, with a chance to talk with Coach Michael Malone and then also Sean Payton. And then he met the press on Tuesday. He and general manager George Payton identified the priorities as this NFL combine kickoff. None of it should surprise you. There are some kind of news and notes regarding Bo Nix, a couple of different injuries, both of which been healed, but I'll give you some news on that. Where is Drew Sanders going to play this season? And we'll have to update on Michael Wilhoite arrest on Sunday, the outside linebackers coach. What does his future hold? The Broncos coaching staff, which probably will be finalized by the end of this week, but obviously a troubling story that happened Sunday at DI. He is not with the team here. He was obviously told to stay home as he's trying to navigate some legal issues. But the Broncos, they arrive here much more optimism. A year ago, did not have a quarterback. We're sure of their future. Now the arrow pointing straight up. They found their man in Bo Nix. They feel like with a couple of additions, they could be a contender this season. What does that mean? Does that mean win a playoff game? Does that make a deep playoff run? I think that's at minimum the goal for this team. They would never say that because you don't want to put a ceiling on it, but to win a playoff game. But they've got to find the right pieces, and a lot of that happens here with identifying the right prospects, seeing the fit, the personality, the character, the football IQ, and also talking to agents regarding free agents, both external and internal. The plan, what is it for Courtland Sutton? Well, of course they're going to talk to him. They want to keep him here, but what about DJ Jones and some others? So a lot of stuff, the NFL buzz, that engine that is the NFL offseason is now in full gear, full steam ahead, and the Broncos feel like they're part of it. They're not the sad sack with the hazards flashing on the side of the road. They're in the race. They're next to the bus, and things are moving up for the Broncos. So we're going to get into all that. Bo Nix injury, Courtland Sutton contract, and NFL, the priorities as the Broncos kick off the combine. We'll get to all of that after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hog Injury Law a call. Their motto, with us, it's personal. It's because it is. Listen, I've known Darby Hogg forever. We traveled the country watching our boys play baseball. We became good friends. Many of Darby's clients become his good friend. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been injured at work or in a car wreck, please give Darby's team a call. Tell them Troy sent you. It's 1-833-HOGGATT. That's 1-833-HOGGIT, or visit their website at hoggetlaw.com. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. It's got the selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From everything, three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds and stats and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome back to the Broncos Pod with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. You can read my coverage here from the NFL Combine at denversports.com/sports, or subscribe to the newspaper, obviously. I read the e-edition now, even though I'm old and love the paper. It's easier because I travel a lot to read the e-edition. But functioning as the Broncos beat writer for a few days, that crew will be together soon. We have Luca Evans from the Orange County Register has joined the Post as number 2 on the Broncos beat. Did just terrific job covering USC. And he will be joined by the man, Parker Gabriel, will be back in the fold here soon. So you'll have the Broncos well covered as free agency kicks off on March 10th. That open kind of tampering, the legal tampering period, if you will. That's the next kind of big date on the schedule. But I'm holding it down for a little bit longer until the crew gets together, and I'll have columns the remainder of this week, some coverage on Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders. So a lot going on here at the NFL Combine. Let's start first with the news, and that's Sean Payton talking about this team and what they need to do to take that next step forward. And, honestly, it's pretty clear that if they're going to be any good at all, then they have to find a way to improve offensively. And that comes with, you have Bo Nix absolutely exceeded expectations. You look at what Nix did. I mean, he was drafted 12th overall, met with a healthy bit of skepticism, and threw 29 touchdown passes. He ran for 4 touchdowns. He caught a touchdown pass. He was wildly productive after the first month of the season. Gave Broncos a chance, and there were multiple games where he was the best player on the field. 6 times he led the Broncos in rushing. So Bo Nix is, when you start with hope, it starts there. And Sean Payton understands that, talked about, Bo Nix, the confidence he gives the team, that the arrow is definitely pointing up. We'll have a little more on that later and what he talked about. But if this team is going to make that next step and take that next step, they can improve offensively. And how do you do that? You've got to be better controlling the middle of the field. Courtland Sutton has been terrific. I think we can all agree. And I was a skeptic of Sutton because prior to Sean Payton joining the Broncos and taking over that clown car that had steered to the ditch by Nathaniel Hackett, prior to Sean Payton arriving, Sutton had 2 touchdowns in his previous 26 games. You can't pay a guy as your top receiver and he can't get in the end zone. Well, last 2 years, all Sutton's done is have 18 touchdowns, 10 in 2023 and 8 last year. And he had caught a career high 81 passes. So that is why George Payton and Sean Payton, they're going to talk to a lot of agents here, but certainly a priority is to talk to Sutton's agent, see if they can work something out on a contract extension. What would that look like? Now, listen, for me, there's similarities to Garrett Bowles. He is the longest tenured Bronco, Bowles, and they worked something out late last season, 3-year extension. It's essentially 2 years guaranteed. I think something similar with Sutton. You look at Calvin Ridley as a comp who's 30 years old. Ridley, 4-year, 92 as a free agent last year, and he had to leverage the free agency, so it's not apples to apples. But Sutton will be 30 during this season, very similar in terms of age. So could Sutton get 3-year 70 with $45 million guarantee types contract? That's what they did with Bowles, so you guarantee and front load the first 2 years. They definitely want him back. I know that not only what they said in their public press conference, but talking to sources privately, they want Sutton back because they appreciate not only production, not only that he's become a third safety valve and popular target for Bo Nix, but he's a leader. He's a captain. He's well respected in the room. As you build culture and you try to get over the hump, he's one of the few guys that was left over that kind of fully bought in and then feels like now a Sean Payton player, if you will. So that is a priority. DJ Jones is also someone they want back. I don't know where that's going to go. DJ played on a contract 3-year, $30 million. He's not coming back at $10 million per season. What would that number be for him to come back? And because I know he wants to. I talked to DJ in the locker room. I think we aired it here on the podcast. He definitely wants to be back. He sees some San Francisco vibes here, a team definitely on the uptick. But what is that number? What is that number to get him to come back? Is it 5? I don't know. Is it 7? That is it a 2-year deal with 1 year guaranteed? They could use him because when this team evaluated its strengths in its off-season, kind of self-scout, they ID the strongest parts of the team are O-line, D-line. And if you lose DJ Jones, he's a run stuffer. He's not a premium player, but he's that next tier down. And again, can you fill that in the draft? Perhaps. But you have a known quantity in D.J. Jones where you went from arguably the worst rush defense in the NFL to one of the best. So we'll see where it goes there. But in terms of the offense, which we all love to talk about, we're a fantasy league-driven society. Points, points, points. For the Broncos to score more points, to move the chains, to get away from those 3 and outs, to keep the ball on the field more, they've got to identify needs. And Sean Payton discussed that it's clearly that joker position, the tight end and the running back. Getting the guy at one of those positions that can create mismatches in the middle of the field. So he was asked, can he find that player in the draft? And how important, I asked, is it that you start to control the middle of the field? Because other than maybe the Colts, no team was worse from tight end production, and no team has been worse the last 3 years in terms of pass catching from the tight end. So can they find that joker player, the Loch Ness Monster? Oh, Nessie. Can they find that elusive player, the Kamara, the Jimmy Graham, in this draft, and how important is that they control the middle of the field? Here's Sean Payton.
Oh, well, I mean, when you pick 20, it's not as easy to say, hey, we're going to find that, because that player can be a running back, it can be a tight end, and yet it's just something that we're mindful of as we look at both the draft and free agency. And I use that term. It's just when you have one of those guys that are matchup challenges inside, really helps you a third down red zone, because there's ways defensively you can handle the outside receivers and force the ball inside. So, but that's something that we'll look closely at.
You're talking about wants and needs.
Yeah.
How would you categorize running back and tight end? How important is it from one of those positions to be able to better control the middle of the field offense?
Well, I think it helps. It helps. So, the tight end or running back being able to be a target relative to the center of the field. Different than a guard or an edge rusher, corner. Like sometimes, a draft might only have maybe a candidate or two at one of those positions. Certainly you hit a couple positions that would fit in the must realm, and yet I would say not at all costs. It's got to be something that makes sense when we're either signing them in free agency or drafting them, but it is a priority.
Do you have to address Courtland with his contract situation?
No, I think, George and I were just talking about it. Those discussions will take place. George, Courtland's representatives, and we felt like he had a real good season. He's important to what we're doing. So all of that will happen in time, and I don't think now's the time.
Listen, the Broncos are not moving forward without that. And I do think the offense has room for growth. Yes, the league's going to adjust to Bo Nix. The skeptics were already out yesterday. Well, they got the film on Bo Nix. They're going to understand Bo Nix. That's part of the sophomore season. And we saw some of that with C.J. Stroud, and that gets mentioned as a comp for Nix. You can struggle your second year. And Stroud did, especially on the road. But Stroud's thing for me, watching a bunch of their games, linked to injury. Once he lost his top receivers, he wasn't the same player. And then he got a little skittish from feeling pressure. You look at Bo Nix, one of the keys for him to avoid a sophomore slump, which I don't think would happen, is not getting sacked, not getting skittish. Last year, he sacked in the 20s. Their sacks were down 30 from 30 plus from a year ago. The Broncos had one of the best sack differentials in the league, from the number of sacks defensively, I believe 63, to the number of times Bo Nix was sacked. That's huge, because drives get sacked, it almost immediately leads to a punt. It's crazy how often. And Nooks was only sacked 24 times in 17 starts. That is a low number, folks. That is one of the lowest. That's not Peyton Manning-esque, but that's in the neighborhood. But for Nix to move forward, he's got to be able to have a security blanket in the middle of the field. Colston Loveland is the guy, when I talk to people out here in Indy, A lot of people I trust mock Colston Loveland, not just the national mocks you see, but other insiders and people in the business mock Michigan's Colston Loveland to the Broncos. But he's coming off right shoulder surgery. His doctor sent him an email to all NFL teams saying that he could attend. He'd be there for OTAs and minicamps and would be fully cleared for training camp. But that shoulder surgery kept him out at the end of the Michigan season, which cut into some of his numbers. But Colston Loveland is more of a slot-type receiver at tight end. If you fall into these categories of he's a Gronk guy or he's a Kelsey guy, and it doesn't mean they're going to be those two guys. But it just for a matter of comparison, Colston Loveland is more of a Kelsey guy, understanding how he's being covered, understanding soft spots in the zone, the ability to be shifty and change speed and run routes like a slot receiver. You then talk about Tyler Warren, more like a Gronk guy. And then Harold Fannin is essentially a receiver playing tight end. I know people love him from Bowling Green. I don't necessarily see the fit there. If his hand's ever in the dirt, I'll be surprised. He's really a receiver playing tight end. I do like Mason Graham from LSU. He would be an option. But they've got to find a tight end. And maybe Johnson, the kid from New Orleans, you bring him along too and just completely redo that room with a new veteran, a drafted tight end, and maybe Troutman stays. One of the guys from the three of Troutman, Atkins, and Kroll, one of them stays. And maybe another one ends up in the practice squad, whatever. But you need more production. But what about running back? You look at Ashton Genty. Would he fall? Caleb Jones from Iowa, would he be available if you stay put in the second round at 51? Excuse me, Johnson, would he be available? Got a couple of guys from Ohio State to be on the board then. Omarion Hampton is a name that when I talk, people think it would be a perfect fit for the Broncos. Is that too rich to take him at 20? Well, not if you think he's a game changer. Because listen, they have to be better running the football. There's just no way around it. They cannot continue to move forward with their offensive attack the way it was last year. And part of this too now is 2 years in, 8-9, 10-8, counting the playoff game at 10-7. You end this playoff drought of 8 years. You end the streak of 7 straight losing seasons. Now you're in the postseason. How do you handle success? How now do you feel confident but not complacent? That you want more. And it's coming from the top of the ownership. I guarantee you they're not satisfied. How does that manifest itself on the roster? Integrating some new players, creating that competition, keeping guys on edge, never feeling totally comfortable. Sean Payton talked about that, this idea of moving forward now that they got through and had the breakthrough, significant milestones in terms of the way they're playing against the Chiefs, the way they're playing on the road. They're better at home. The playoff drought's over. Now, how do you carry that momentum into the 2025 season? Here's Sean Payton talking about that at the NFL Combine on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think the one thing we have to avoid is this idea we're going to pick up where we left off. I really don't like that because our league has shown anymore, the season ends and you kind of take the proverbial game board and you take all the pieces and dump them and then you set it back up and you start again. Certainly you're more confident. The experience has helped a number of players. But, the journey begins. So we've got, and we don't shy away from it, our expectations are high, and I'm encouraged with some of the things that we did this past season, and yet still kind of hungry for more.
We see Harold to your right. I'm wondering what you think of coaching in this division that's arguably the most decorated in the NFL.
I'm the youngest. Thanks, Pete. No, listen, we've had so many good games and battles. When he was at Seattle, Andy and Harb, Jim. I mean, sometimes it's coincidence, but there's without a doubt, that your division opponent is going to be extremely well coached. And that's just proof in the pudding with all three of those guys.
Back at your career, that's a lot of hardware split amongst yourself, Andy, Pete Carroll, even
we're still trying to collect it.
When you think over your career, have you ever seen a situation like this in the division? Like,
So if you went back to the NFC East, and we're talking about just coaches in divisions, I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but Gibbs and Parcells and Landry, I don't know who was at Philly at that time, St. Louis, the division was bigger then. But certainly my first year in New Orleans, you know, a couple of my closest coaching friends that I'd worked with, you know, we had to find a way to get past Gruden in Tampa, and Foxy was at Carolina, Jim Moore Jr. at Atlanta. So when it comes to your division and you're playing those teams twice, you know, I'd rather be looking at someone else than Pete right now, but that's a credit to what he's accomplished, and I think a good hire, obviously. Running back. So I would say Audric and Blake and also Tyler, you know, Bede are all three young players, and Jaleel I would put in that category. But overall, from a running back perspective, you know, we've got to continue to look, whether it's in the draft. And I say this respectfully, I think it's a position that, generally speaking, you can find either in free agency or throughout the draft. But I've been a part of drafts where we've selected runners high. Is it a priority for us? I think certainly improving our running game is going to be a priority, and we feel like we've got the right offensive line and the right group of players to give us a chance at that. But this draft has got a number of runners in it, and it's just a matter of what you're looking for. But we'll see where we go from there. Go ahead. Where have I grown the most? I've said this before to you guys. You get a little wiser, and you don't stress about some of the things that you learn. What's worth burning your calories and energy on? You get a little bit more wiser relative to understanding what's really important, and then maybe something that's not at all.
Again, gives you some insight into it. Sean Payton, always remember, folks, he comes from the Bill Parcells coaching tree. This is a guy who understands you're part coach, part couch, the psychology of motivation, how to push buttons. Some guys need a pat on the back, some guys need a kick in the rear. I mean, and that's part of the excellence of Sean Payton and many great coaches. Understanding personalities, understanding not every person is the same. What is the love language between the player and the coach? Payton creates a tight ship. There's discipline. There's accountability. These guys love that they're scheduled and they're regimented. They really no surprises of, oh, practice was at 11. No, I'll make it 10. Oh, let's move it to noon. There's none of that. And it's very disciplined in how they run things. But there's also some nuance in there, too, on how he communicates with specific players and pushes them. And so that is part of it as well. And one of the things that's interesting, and Sean Payton could take a victory lap on this. He knows better because they went 10-8. They didn't go, 13 wins and reach the Super Bowl. But when he sat up there at that podium, at the podium last year, he said with both confidence / arrogance that they were going to be better at identifying quarterbacks than most teams. And part of that comes from his experience as an offensive coordinator, his experience calling plays, and what he believes is the stability of ownership, general manager, coach. You're all working together. We're all pulling on the same end of the rope. We're not dealing with this dysfunction of on draft day, it's, the owner's coming in and deciding, well, we should do this because I read a fortune cookie and that's why I want to now draft this guy. Or the GM, disregarding all the advice from his scouts. Like, there is a process to this of continuity. There's a process of reliability. There's a process of creating trust, and they're there now. They're not going to get all decisions right. That's just not the NFL draft. They got the decision right on Bo Nix. I think we can all agree on that. Even the critics of Bo Nix have to admit he had a good season. And when you frame that with expectations, I would say he had a great season. He had one of the better rookie seasons in NFL history. It doesn't mean he's a future Hall of Famer, but for me, 10 wins is the floor. And 12 next year, 11 to 12 is possible. And then 2026, if the climb continues, they would be in position, the Broncos, to contend for a Super Bowl. I don't see that necessarily this year. Obviously, we haven't gone through the draft and free agency. But this is a team with high expectations and realizes now you're only a few pieces away, not needing you don't need a telescope anymore to see the contenders because you had no quarterback. But I asked Sean Payton yesterday about the idea that, he talks about the bust, the offseason, the media bust that drives the narratives. And there was a healthy amount of skepticism about Bo Nix, the player, and the Broncos selection of Bo Nix. Even some of that continues to disrespect this offseason, which is fascinating to me. It feels personal with some people, like they just can't admit what they saw. But I asked Sean Payton that. There's criticism about the pick. What is it about Bo Nix that makes him believe that he isn't close to reaching his ceiling? Coach Payton answered my question on Tuesday in that regard.
The skepticism of when Bo was drafted.
Yeah.
Now they're saying, well, maybe this was his ceiling. What about Bo makes you think you haven't hit his ceiling, that there's much more there moving forward?
Just as you just had to watch the games, the narrative, and you just have to watch the athleticism, the learning curve. Look, if I did this, let's just say, from a media perspective for a living, and I have this vision as to what I think he is, and then all of a sudden, look, he's got plenty of arm strength. We saw it. Just look at all the numbers relative to his completions downfield. I think he was third in 20-yard completions. I mean, and I said this last year respectfully. I just think it's a tough position to evaluate, and there's a difference between entertainment and then from the club side where it's everything. And so the entertainment, and that's with no disrespect, but the access and to truly evaluate it properly. But it's a good lesson yearly that it can move a club certain directions if you're not paying attention, any position, and so we felt pretty confident that, and at that time a year ago it wasn't like we didn't know who that was. We just felt like we'd be able to get that right, or at least have a good likelihood of getting it right. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I sat behind him. One of the things about that event, it had been a while since I'd gone, when you walk into NFL Honors and you look around the room, you could say, I know who's winning every award, because when the other candidates aren't there, it's a sign. And so I saw Josh Allen had the first two rows taken up on this side, and I thought, well, it looks like Josh is going to be anyway. I was sitting right behind Patrick and his family. I was thrilled for him. And then I was excited for Trey Hendrickson and also Zach Baun. Those are other players that were candidates that we had drafted. And then I think I gave Patrick a hard time, and I said, we might be able to get you in the Jordan shoes now, and he smiled. Well, I text Mickey, and I said, hey, when are you guys hiring your head coach? And he texted me back, he said, when are you hiring your special teams coordinator? And so I worked with Darren. I hadn't worked with him before. New Orleans, the late Tony Sperano, a close friend of mine, who was the head coach of the Dolphins, I think was the first guy to bring him into our league. And you had to know Tony. For him to like rave about somebody, like that might be once every 3 years, but I know how Tony felt about him. So I can't remember the year we hired him in New Orleans. He's a tremendous teacher. He's thorough, and yet, with respect to the process, he was a very serious candidate, and I think will be a head coach in our league as well. But he was a very serious candidate in New Orleans, and we had time.
And I agree with him. I'm more bullish on Bo Nix than most because he has an almost unhealthy obsession with winning. He has an unhealthy obsession with preparation. He does keep perspective in his life, faith, and family, but he has preparation the way he lives it. He eats it. He breathes it. It's funny. I've been in Lyfts and Ubers out here in Indianapolis, and every one of these guys want to talk about, Peyton Manning, miss Peyton Manning, and Anthony Richardson. This guy's asking out of games, and he's showing up last guy in, first guy out. And I'm like, yeah, you just can't do it in the NFL. It sounds like Richardson's a remarkable kid. People like him, but if you're the quarterback of an NFL team, you are the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It has got to almost define your existence for long parts of a day. Not every moment, but it has to be so important to you to be able to succeed in a hyper-competitive industry of type A personalities and the best of the best. And Nix has that trait. He does. And so what is the off-season, these injuries? A couple of different updates. Finally, talking to multiple sources confirmed. Remember, we spoke about this in the podcast, Bo Nix was the fourth alternate for the Pro Bowl, and he declined the invitation. I don't blame him. The Pro Bowl is a joke. But he did so for a reason. Not so he couldn't put Pro Bowl on his resume. Obviously, I mean, you still want that, even though it's silly now. Once Scoop Huntley made the Pro Bowl, it was over. Like, there's no more counting a Pro Bowl. Unless you're a starter, that's different. But as a reserve, it's become a joke. But Nix elected not to go as an alternate, and the reason was he had the surgery. It turns out, when I wrote about this in the Denver Post, it was a cleanup procedure on his ankle. It was a pre-existing issue he wanted corrected in the offseason. It was a cleanup. He's been a regular at the facility. I was told by someone yesterday he's there every day. So, but he didn't want to delay the surgery like a week to go to the Pro Bowl and then set back his calendar because he's very regimented, as you might expect. So he wanted to get the surgery done on like that Thursday, right at the end of January, to create the recovery time, to create the schedule for him to get into the weight room and to get into his workouts in Denver. So it was an ankle. We did find out with Sean Payton on the podium, and he spoke for 30 minutes on Tuesday, which is remarkable because they only have to talk for 15, and some don't even make it 15. And when he was with the Saints, he typically did not even attend the combine and do the media session. Attend the combine and not do the media session. 30 minutes covered a lot of topics. Part of it was he was talking about guys who've left his staffs, from Aaron Glenn to Johnny Morton to Declan Doyle. So that was a good chunk of questions. I would say at least like 10 minutes was him talking about guys who've left the staff, guys he's either coached that are coaches now in Aaron Glenn, like the Dan Campbells, or guys who've left his staff this year to go to other teams. So because all the other writers are here, want to get information on that. And I can understand that. I can. But he spoke for 30 minutes about that, a lot of different topics, and a lot was on that. But he was much more comfortable in this environment. You could tell, and I wrote this late last year, I've written it multiple times, but he's no longer the former, the New Orleans Saints coach coaching the Broncos. He is the Broncos coach. He's become one of us, if you will. He's in Denver now. He's set his feet in the ground. He's like, be where your feet are. He's present in Denver. You can tell that. He's more comfortable. He's not having to mark his territory. He's comfortable being the Broncos coach. Obviously, the winning season helped in that regard. But you get a chance to see that this is kind of where he wants to be. And he likes this team. He likes where they're going. And they have an opportunity basically to, improve on last year and put this team back on track. People forget, that 8-year drought, man, folks, for 35 years, the Broncos had more Super Bowl appearances than losing seasons. This is who they were for 3.5 decades. But let's get to some of the other news regarding the Broncos. You got a good taste of what Sean Payton had to say. I'm sure if you want the entire thing, it's probably on Broncos.com. I wanted to just give you bites that are more relevant to what I'm working on. And that last bite you heard also the cool thing of him talking about Pat Surtain winning Defensive Player of the Year. But let's get into a couple of roster issues. Drew Sanders, I asked him about him specifically. The plan is for Sanders to be an inside linebacker. Would that prevent them from going after someone like Zach Bond in free agency or Nick Bolton? I don't know. They're going to have a little bit of money. And, if they go for an Aaron Jones in free agency, they're going to have a little bit. Maybe they spend it on one player, Zach Bond, an all-pro that played for Sean Payton in New Orleans. Not as an inside backer, but obviously Payton would trust the recommendation of his good friend Vic Fangio. So that, or Bolton. But they need more speed at that position. Sanders could be that answer. Does he come in and they say compete with Cody Barton and with the belief that Alex Singleton's healthy, and then the following year Sanders is the starter, or could he be the starter this year with Singleton? But Drew Sanders, who was a star in rookie camp a couple years ago, just with his athleticism, could he be a guy that solves that speed sideline to sideline issue? So he's staying inside. That's one issue to keep an eye. A tight end in that room. I don't know who's all going to be back. I do wonder because they like Troy Franklin, they like Devon Bailey. The second year is kind of that development year. You learn as a rookie, you develop, and then that third year is kind of that crossroads make decision year. So these are big years for Franklin and Bailey. I see them back with Mims. Little Jordan Humphrey, what's his future? You look at his body type and his frame. Would he be a guy that's a candidate to be one of the tight ends? And that's how you shape the tight end room, with a rookie, him and Troutman type thing. I think that's something to keep an eye on in regards. But there was a report about Rob Gronkowski possibly coming out of retirement, having interest in the Broncos because of his relationship with Sean Payton. All I can tell you is everyone on Tuesday dismissed that out of hand. It really doesn't track with where they're going. Nobody respects, Gronk's career more than I do. I've had people that are close to me in my life that are huge Patriots fans, and so watch a lot of Patriots games with Gronk. But he hasn't played in 4 years? I mean, come on now. And he's an first ballot Hall of Fame, one of the all-time greats. That doesn't make a lot of sense for me. And the same reasons I know internally, they're not interested in Deebo Samuel. Older, injured player, ineffective, wants to be paid. Cooper Kupp, they don't have interest in trading. If he was a free agent and got cut, and you could sign him for $4 million or $5 million, perhaps. They're not trading for him and paying him $12.8 million. They're just not in position at that thing to bring Gronk in. Again, I'm not gonna. These reporting things are hard. I'm not passing judgment on the information. All I know is I was told that that's not something the Broncos are interested in. It's just it doesn't fit and align with younger, hungrier, moving forward, not going back to old injured players looking for one more bite at the apple. That's not where they're at. You see a team like Miami's dealt with that, where you bring in the Odell Beckhams and, oh, shock, they never play, they're always hurt, but they get one more paycheck. And you don't want to be that team. And I think they saw some of that with Frank Clark, frankly, that, he's just trying to hang on for one more year, and he realized right away it's just not a fit here. I mean, he was probably done as a player, but it's just not a fit. He needed to be in a situation where he could practice once a week and be on a team surrounded with a bunch of great players. They didn't have that when he was in Denver. And so you move on from him. That's why with Gronk, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe he does try to come back. And I'm rooting for him if he does. I prefer he not. I think his legacy is obviously secure. But I don't see that happening. So, Drew Sanders there, Gronk thing, for me, there's nothing there regarding that. And, again, you have to keep an eye on some of these other positions like safety. Is PJ Locke safe? Will they look to upgrade there? They're probably going to add D-line throughout this draft. And again, as we circle back, keep an eye on running back, keep an eye on tight end in both free agency and in the draft. And finally, let's get to Michael Wilhoite, the Broncos outside linebackers coach. Had a troubling incident on Sunday. I wrote about it in the Denver Post. We had a follow-up story in the news section by one of our news reporters. According to the police report and court records, Wilhoite is dropping off family member around 2 p.m. on Sunday at DIA, and he leaves his car in the pickup zone in the east terminal of DIA. We've all been to the airport. We drop people off. You're not supposed to leave your car unattended. They literally have it on the microphone, and it reverberates through the thing saying, do not leave your car unattended. I don't know that I have. I'm sure 35 years of traveling, I usually have to park and then go in. So it's not really an issue for me, but it happens. And then according to this, after he's coming back to his car, he's told by a police officer, you can't leave your car unattended. He says, shut the F up. And then they have this confrontation. He says, shut the F up again. They get into then a physical confrontation that involved like a chest bump and then a punch where Wilhoite punches the police officer, according to the police record I have and the court record. And then at that point, he gets into his car. They tase him, and he still drives away. He ends up charged with felony assault, 1-count felony assault of a police officer. He had a Monday morning hearing at 10:30 a.m. where he was released on bond. As for his status, it's up in the air. I talked to a league spokesman yesterday that said the incident is under review per the NFL's personal conduct policy, that even though he's a coach, obviously he fits under the purview of the personal conduct policy, so he could face suspension from that. Broncos are monitoring the situation. They're allowing it to play out. There's a legal issue involved, but obviously there's a chance he may not be back on the coaching staff, which would be unfortunate for him because he was considered one of the young rising coaches on that staff. But that's where it stands now, that they're monitoring it. We'll see. He could face suspension by the league, as this is a legal issue now. They're filling out the rest of the staff. I would expect, Darren Rizzi's in place as the special teams coach. They'll get an assistant line coach to work with Zach Strief. I was told the Saints tried to bring Zach Strief back this offseason, so they were able to keep him. They were able to keep Davis Webb, who was attracting some interest. He won't be the OC or the calling plays, but could he be more involved, like as the passing game coordinator? That would not surprise me. With Johnny Morton leaving, that Webb gets a different title and expands his duties. For me, he's going to be an OC soon, in the next couple of years. I 100% believe that. And expect them to have an assistant special teams coach filled in. They need a linebackers coach, not in because that was Minuski. They had the outside linebackers coach was Wilhoite. They might need an outside and inside linebackers coach, but they need to fill for sure the inside linebackers coach position, perhaps the outside. But look for them to have an assistant line coach in place, assistant special teams coach Darren Rizzi in place. And I would expect that Davis Webb probably has a different title and he's retained. So all of that should kind of come together here in the next few days. I'll hope to drop another pod on Friday as I talk more about the Broncos, but even Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. What's the vibe on them? Where could their draft status change during this combine? It's been forever. This was kind of been one of the headline grabbers at the combine. They certainly are with Shedeur and Travis. And both, certainly Travis could help the Broncos, even at receiver. But the Broncos' priorities, folks, are the Joker, not Nicola, not Heath Ledger, not the Steve Miller song. They need a hybrid running back or tight end, and they're on the search. Folks, I could not do this pod without the support of Nate Lundy, Big A behind the screen, producer. But those folks from Mile High Sports have been just great to me. And, of course, my A1 from day one, Darby Hoggett of Hoggett Injury Law and Bet Online, our sponsor. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.